Loss Remembrance Day, and I'm here just to share with you guys my experience of miscarriage. My husband and I have had 3, and I am finding this experience of sharing my experience has been really positive. I would love to hear your stories in the comment section, or you can message me through my website, which is in the description below. If you would like to follow us on our fertility journey, make sure you subscribe below as well. So my husband and I got married really young. We got married at 19 and 20, and we really wanted to wait to have kids so we had time to grow up a little bit, finish our degrees, and just be married for a little while. So when we were 25, we spent 5 years just being married and traveling and doing all those things. We decided to have a baby. Our parents had been bugging us for a long time for a grandchild, so we were really excited to spring it on them because we had been sort of pretending like we weren't really interested in that lifestyle and that kind of thing, but we totally were. We had bought a house, we had bought a dog, because we didn't want a puppy and a baby at the same time. There were just a lot of things we thought about going into it. We didn't know how long it would take. We knew that infertility was really common. We had watched some of our good friends really go through a hard time, and it broke our hearts. So we didn't know what was in store for us. We ended up getting pregnant right away, and we were just over the moon excited. I went a little overboard with I ate everything organic, and just everything was about being healthy and stress-free and restful. And then in the fall, my husband and I were both teachers, but teachers were on strike in BC at that time, and we had a mortgage to pay, so I took a job with a friend up north, just working administration at a mine up there. So I was working 2 weeks out, 1 week home. I was up there, I knew I was pregnant, and the people I worked with were not super family oriented. They weren't super keen on children or any of those kind of things. It's sort of a different lifestyle of the people that work up there. So I didn't tell anyone I was pregnant. I didn't think that anyone would really be happy for me. But I just kept my little secret, and I was really excited. And while I was up there though, I started to have some bleeding. And immediately I was freaked out. I went right to Google, and Google said that bleeding, even some women had said they'd had a lot of bleeding and they still had a baby. So I really held on to that hope. However, and I don't know how to explain this, but I always knew I was going to lose that baby. I don't know how. I don't know how to explain it. And every time that feeling just crept up, I would push it away and just say oh, it's just first pregnancy jitters. And I just thought don't be morbid, Juliana, push those thoughts out of your head. And I would really quickly, and then I wouldn't think about them again. And then I would just have that feeling again. It would creep up, and again I just be oh, you're being so paranoid. So when I saw the bleeding, it was just confirmation of that, but I still really resisted. I was no, there's still a chance. And I called my doctor the second day when the bleeding was heavier and hadn't stopped. And I said, look, this is what's happening. Am I having a miscarriage? And she said, yeah, it sounds like you are, and you need to get to a doctor. And I said, well, I am hours away from a doctor in a camp. Is going to a doctor going to even do anything for me? And she said, well, no, a doctor can't stop it or fix it or do anything. If you've started to miscarry, then that's it. And so I just said, well, I'm not gonna go to the doctor then. But I had no idea what to expect at that point. So that night I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, I don't remember what time it was, I just woke up and it felt like someone was doing surgery on me. Just the sharpest pains in my lower abdomen. And I just knew for sure what was happening. And I passed the baby and whatever was inside me. It was an insane amount of bleeding. It was the middle of the night, so I went to the front desk and I said, is there a doctor, a medic for the camp? And I'm in my pajamas. I look like hell. And I'm tear stained. I look awful. And the front desk person is like so chipper, and they're like, oh yeah, you just call this number on your phone. And I kind of looked at him and he went, do you want me to do it? And I said, yes, please. So he called the doctor, and he let me speak to her. She didn't answer the first couple times. When I finally got a hold of her, she sounded like she had just woken up, which, fair enough, is the middle of the night. But she would ask me the stupidest questions, like, so, like, are you sure? And I'm like, I am definitely sure. And anyways, we kind of had a weird phone conversation, and she finally agreed to meet me. So I went down to her room, and she let me into the medical room, and I said, like, look, I need the strongest painkillers you had. I've never had pain like this before. I was doubled over. And she goes, well, I don't want to give you any Advil because that could hurt the baby if you're not really having a miscarriage. And I was like, I don't know how to tell you that I know for 100% sure there's no pregnancy left. I can take the ibuprofen. So she ended up giving me Tylenol. She still didn't believe me. She sent me back to my room. I almost passed out in the hallway. I was in so much pain. I made it back to my room. I took the medicine, and it probably took 20-25 minutes to kick in. All the meanwhile, I'm like in the most excruciating pain ever, to the point that I could feel the moment that the medicine kicked in. It was so bizarre because it was like when you have a really sharp pain and all of a sudden it starts to like dull, you just feel the edge of it come off. That's sort of what happened. And eventually I fell asleep, and in the morning I went to our lady who books our flights, and I just told her, I got like halfway into her room before I burst into tears, and I was like, I need you to send me home. She was so sympathetic to me. She had had 7 miscarriages, like some of them quite far along. I was only 12 weeks. And she began to tell me her stories in much more graphic detail than I needed, but at the same time, at that moment, her knowing how I felt in this environment where like I didn't feel like anybody would was super important to me. It helped me a lot. She booked my flight immediately, and I went home. I obviously called my husband, tell him what was going on, and he met me at the airport, and I'll just never forget like the look on his face when he picked me up. I think he just didn't know how to react, like happy to see me, but just like so devastated alongside me. When I got home, one of the hardest parts was that I had all my doctor's appointments booked for when I got home with the expectation that I would still be pregnant. So I had like a massage booked, and I had an appointment with the naturopath booked just to talk about things like, is it okay that I'm drinking tea? And I had an appointment booked for my ultrasound and just all these things. And I had to still go to all those appointments, but with now the purpose being like, okay, now I've lost the baby, so now what? So every time I sat in one of those offices, I just would think about how I was supposed to be here for a happy reason. And this time I wasn't. So my MD, she did, like the pregnancy urine test with me, and I sat in her office trying to keep it together, trying not to cry in front of her, trying to just keep it together. And she came in the room. She didn't really look at me. She just went to her computer, started typing away, looking, kind of through her glasses. She goes, yeah, so there's definitely no pregnancy. There's 1 in 5. And I was like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, 1 in 5 pregnancies are a miscarriage. And she starts to sort of like, I don't know, book my ultrasound or whatever. And I just remember thinking, I know that's supposed to like comfort me in some way, and it did to some degree, to think like, okay, this has happened before. I'm not the only person in the world. In fact, it's quite common. But I just was like looking for comfort and I didn't feel it. And looking back, I realized like if she had said like, "Are you doing okay?" I probably would have cried the entire appointment, but she sent me on my way. I had a really good talk with my naturopath. The ultrasound showed that I had passed everything naturally, so I didn't have to have a DNC. I think if you have a DNC, you have to wait a little longer in between trying again, just because your lining has to grow back and be healthy again. But I was fortunate I didn't have to have that. I think they're also a little bit painful. After the physical pain was over, it was just left to deal with the emotional pain, which for me lasted about a week. Just like a solid week of feeling really depressed. That's the best way to describe it. It's like you look outside and you don't care about anything, you don't feel anything, nothing has flavor, nothing has color. You just feel like you're in a hole and you don't know when you're gonna get out of it. To be honest, you just are in it and it feels like there isn't an end at that point. You might know there is with your head, but your heart doesn't know that, and so you just feel like nothing. And after that week, it was like, okay, it's time to be happy again. It's time to see color and taste flavor and be alive again. I've had my time to be sad, I've mourned and I've grieved, and now I choose to be happy. And for me, that was my experience and how long it took, and for you it might be 2 weeks or a month or whatever it is that you need. And I think it also depends on what kind of miscarriage you had, if it was the first time, the second time. For me, I was very hopeful that, okay, this was my one time, I got it out of the way, right? Like, so now I'm not gonna have problems, I know I can get pregnant. And so it was like, well, let's try again, because now I've got mine out of the way, there's no way it's gonna happen again. And at that time I didn't know it would be a pattern, but that was kind of the hope that I had, and I think that's what helped it only be about a week for me. But I remember having to go to things that were happy and having a hard time with that, and I think that's normal. So that was the first time, and I've had 2 since then. We are seeing a fertility specialist now because of the history and having 3. With the last one, it took us 6 months to get pregnant, and I miscarried that baby at 9 weeks, so I'll talk about that story in my other video. And now we're just sort of in a waiting period. Thanks for watching. I would love to hear your stories. You can put them in the comments below, you can comment on my website, but I would love to empathize with you, and I just want you to know that you are not alone.